You guys, please sign my petition in the link below and listen to this testimony you're about to hear.
One of the guys looks at my dad as saying to both of us, keep your head down, your eyes on the hills and man in front of you, or you'll be shot. And we kind of started giggling because, at least I knew one of the guys was one of his buddies, people that he used to hang out with. And the other guy, I recognized him as the guy who we went hunting with before. I knew later on that they were both Delta operators. If they were still active, I have no clue.
Do you know their names?
I do.
Do you want to say their names?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And I'll tell you later why. But yeah, hell no.
So you're seeing familiar faces, which makes you comfortable,
right?
And you don't realize how
the shitstorm I just stepped into. Yeah, absolutely not.
What exactly were you guys there to do?
What he told me was that we were going down below ground to set up a shoot house. An indoor live fire range that was going to be underground. Nothing new. Again, I didn't think anything of it. We had done other shoot houses before with the open tops that can be viewed from above.
Mm-hmm. With a catwalk.
It didn't
even phase you.
It was just another day at work.
Okay.
And I was just there to help him out. But we get down, the doors open, and the first thing I see are these personnel connexes off to my right, the smaller ones, not the larger ones that you see scattered around, or like the ones you'd see on a big rig carrying around. These were the small ones you would throw your personal gear in to go before you get shipped overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I looked past them, I could see this giant monolithic slab just sitting there. At first, it didn't, once again, it didn't set off any alarms. I didn't think much of it, but the closer we got to it, I could feel this intense vibration. But you couldn't hear anything. It was dead silent in there. The loudest thing was the footsteps that I could hear. And
what did the vibration feel like?
It felt like being at a concert, standing next to one of the speakers, and
without
the bass just permeating through your body without the noise.
There was zero noise.
Zero.
Vibration.
Absolute zero. I could still hear myself breathing over this, but inside, it was such a strange feeling to have. So the closer I got, I was like, well, I got to check this out. So I go down to one knee, thinking I got to tie my boots. And then I glance up underneath it, and there's absolutely nothing underneath this damn thing. Nothing holding it up whatsoever.
What did the slab look like?
It just looked like a granite slab, but the sheen on it is what caught my attention the most. It was kind of in between being polished or just completely translucent. There was something behind it, but you could tell it had a smooth surface to us. And the only lights that were on in that hangar that we were in were directly over our head where we were walking through that walkway. And
how big was the slab?
Oh God, it was about 20 foot long. It was about 7 foot tall, and I couldn't tell how wide it was. By that point, I was already directly in front of it.
So there's it would be impossible for a human to even think about picking something like this up.
Oh, there's no way.
Okay.
Even with the construction that we've done, if you had to pick up something like that to move it anywhere, you would need at least 3-4 cranes.
Oh, wow.
Herrera could tell you better.
Okay.
The scope of equipment that it would take just to get it off the ground, not even to transport it to another location. But at this point, I'm still down on my knee, and I'm looking, and behind it, I can see 2 people standing. The only thing I can see is their feet, but there's this boulder directly behind it, and it's on the ground. And I glance over my shoulder, and there's a guy with his back turned to me standing in front of another boulder identical of the other one that I could see up underneath the monolithic slab, and he's just pushing it with one hand, and then I assume he's pushing it in the other direction because it's just freely spinning, no wobble. It's like it was attached to the top and the bottom, and it was paper mache. That's how easily this guy was just spinning it around. Wow. Now, at this point, the escort behind me kicks me in the back, says, "Let's go." So we get up, keep going, go down a flight of stairs. That's when we get to what we call the shoot house. You could see old lanes where they had actually used it before as a live fire range underground. And we'd probably only been down there 20 minutes maybe. Father was taking notes on the dimensions, what we needed, what I guess he understood what they wanted. And I know that we had to replace the walls. It's inconsequential to the story, but we had to replace the rubber on the walls for the shoot house. And in that amount of time, we go back upstairs, exact same route that we took on the way down, and everything's empty when we get to the hangar again. Everything, the two boulders in the back, the monolithic slab, all of it is absolutely gone. And we weren't, 100 yards below these guys. We were just one flight below them. So whatever it was that they were taking out, we would have heard it. Even the people making noise around it, you would have still been able to hear. But it was dead silent. Like I said before, there was nothing in there. Just our feet, but coming back through, it was absolutely gone. Everything in there just vacated. And at that point,
how much time had passed?
Less than 30 minutes. Less than 30 minutes. Because it didn't take us long to do what we had to do downstairs.
Before my event, I was actually very skeptical on it. I'm like, oh, that doesn't exist. ETs don't exist. Aliens don't exist. It's only out of movies and stuff. And it scared the shit out of me when I was a kid, some of those movies. But then this event changed my life in that degree because it confirmed a lot that day. It confirmed multiple facets, not just with, the technology aspect of it, but just the level of corruption and how deep this thing goes, and needless to say, it's something that was a catalyst for other things to at least kind of change my life, to start not looking into it directly, but just try to go deeper. What actually makes things happen?
Yeah.
So
what are you hoping to accomplish by coming out?
I want other people who have witnessed similar things or are part of certain things that are very controversial but end up being true to come out and understand that what's going on is not acceptable. And this is just a facet of corruption. It may not be the political corruption that's coming out now that people are witnessing with their own eyes. People call them conspiracy theories. What I'm hoping to achieve is to get other people on board to understand that the government supports what we're doing, because they were in the dark about this too. And now they're coming out and they're actually putting the hammer down. Recent bills have been passing as far as legislation through the Senate Intelligence Committee saying that these corporations have to give the goods here in 6 months, or else there's going to be some consequences they're going to face, either through the judicial system, which obviously the government's got a lot of weight with that. The other aspect of it too is that they're going to ban these companies from doing contracting work for the government, which means they're going to lose billions of dollars. They're going to go broke. So I'm hoping that they actually comply with this measure, because one, this technology is going to help benefit humanity as a whole. Not in a militaristic sense, because that's just foolish. It's more to help out humanity, because now everybody's going to be on the same level technology-wise. I think the common ground here, and the narrative with that is you're hearing people come out, at least in the mainstream media, is trying to talk about ETs being evil. My event had nothing to do with ETs. And there's some misconstrued concepts that are going about. The technology may have came from ETs at one point, and that's what we witnessed. But we witnessed much more of a sinister plot with this, that they're using it. We were positioned near the slope. It wasn't like a steep grade or anything, but it was enough to obscure what was going on the other side that we had no idea what was going on. So we got, naturally you want to take the high ground, so you have observation of everything. And this is when we came across this operation. And it was something that stuck out like a sore thumb, because here you have terrain that is a jungle terrain, very green vegetation, things like that. And then you have something that's sticking out right in the middle of an opening, and it looks very odd. is something that's, I'll remember till the rest of my life, to the day that I leave this earth. I'm going to remember seeing that. And it's just imprisoned up here. I had a camera with me. It was a Panasonic cheap camera. It had kind of like, ancient compared to what you got set up in the studio, but it was enough at least because it was part of stuff that I've never did a humanitarian assistance before. So I was taking videos of them dropping stuff off, things like that, until we trekked up to this point. I was taking some pictures because it's a place you would never really ever go to, at least a real part of Indonesia. It's not like Bali or Surabaya where it's like touristy stuff.
Yeah.
This is where it's actual cultured people. You're actually seeing reality here. So it's stuff that I kind of wanted to document and just say, I was a part of this. I can look back and say, I remember that. But then looking north past that slope and seeing that down, and I took some video and some pictures of that. And I had, I stuck it in my dump pouch. I was a saw gunner naturally, so I had M249. That was my favorite weapon. I liked having a belt-fed machine gun. As much as a pain in the ass, I liked having that compared to an M16 or an M4. So because we were in a humanitarian, all they did was give us M16A4s. They had it, RCOs at that time. They weren't the ACOGs. They had the mills on the sides for windage and stuff like that, as well as the PEC 15s. So if we were doing any kind of night range or night operation, we'd have those with our PWS 14s. So it's just a very basic loadout that we were doing. Nothing really crazy. And when we saw this happen, and I want to say unidentified because right now it's identified. Everybody knows what they are now. They're either man-made or they're not. And if they're not, the government's coming out and telling people, admitting it, not directly, but they're still admitting it to a degree that it exists. Because why would they spend time with this legislation coming out?
That's a good point.
Why would they do that? If it doesn't exist, why were they going through these measures to basically hold a gun up to these guys' heads and say, you better relinquish this technology or else? They're not just doing it, and knowing and seeing this unfold, even being in this position of having to brief the Senate Intelligence among the Special Intelligence Service too, which oversees the letter agencies, because they have no idea what's going on either. But the fact that all of us coming together and making this loud amount of noise to get something done about it is just astounding. And now they're finally, for the first time in history, they're going through with this and actually trying to do something about it for their own understanding, but also know the corruption that comes from this.
Yeah.
It's multiple different facets.
I mean, you guys already, all five of you, right, already testified in front of Congress?
So we testified to people of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which were there's some Congress people there as well as some senators.
So in front of the Intelligence Committee by the
Senate.
Senate.
And as well as I do, in any kind of setting like that, whether you're in a SCIF, it's all under oath still, because they're having you sign NDAs and things like that. So you're expected to be truthful with this. Mm-hmm. And seeing the reaction,
big deal.
It is a very big deal. It was nerve-wracking at first because I'm not used to talking to government officials in that nature. And having the support that they've been giving me as well as the protection is just something that I'm very thankful for. I'm very thankful that they all have open minds of this subject. Even though for years there's been a stigma to it. For years there's been a giggle effect because of little green men and flying saucers and all that. I myself never thought to this day that I'd ever see anything like this. So going back to the event, we decided to get in a tactical column and approach this, right? And we got down the slope, and it's just like a clearing and just has this big opening. It's almost a little bit more than the football field because this craft took up a majority of that.
So you crest this hill.
Yep.
You look down into the valley.
Yep.
And there's a clearing.
There's a clearing
with a UAP.
Yes.
Just sitting there.
Sitting there,
hovering.
rotating clockwise. Yep. And that's in transition this color spectrum I was telling you too. And that's why it's something that stuck out. It's not a building, It's not something that you're used to seeing. Maybe topside it could have looked like a building or something that, I don't know. I don't have that perspective. I wasn't a pilot or anything, but I can tell you from our point of view, it's something that it looked very unnatural and abnormal. And that's what got our curiosity to go investigate this. Now, normally because we would have had comms, you're damn right we'd have called it in. Report something suspicious. Maybe get some eyes on a helo, get a hold of their call signs and try to do them fly around, and they never did. And obviously we didn't have comms to do it, but they were more occupied with what was going on behind us. So when we trekked down and got around 150 to 200 meters from it, and this is an opening. By the way, there's no tactical advantage being in this situation because you don't have cover. It's jungle. You have concealment, but this kind of concealment with vegetation is not bulletproof. Mm-hmm. So when we trekked up close, and we were attack column, so obviously you have points here, right, each Marine. So you have visuals of the sides, somebody has point, and somebody has the rear. And all of a sudden, we're enveloped by this military force of, I still to this day don't know who they are. And
How close did you get
to the craft?
to the craft?
Roughly 200 meters, 150, 200.
Did you get to the bottom of the hill?
Yes.
So you could see, so you saw the top of it, and then you could see underneath of it.
And underneath of it had this platform that was on the ground that was separate from this craft hovering. And it was very weird to see. And I was like, okay, I don't know if that's kind of like a cement pad or something. I don't know if it was like a helo pad or anything like that at first. But then started seeing how the material kind of looked very similar to what the craft was. It's like, well, that's separate. So you have something that's on the ground, stationary, and then you have something that's up top, and it's just rotating in a clockwise position. So right when we got close to it, at least 150, 200 meters out, then all of a sudden we were engaged, at least not in a hostile manner, at least, not gunfire or firefight or anything like that. But the way that these guys moved was so fluid, it was so still, it was very, very, very smooth. And it kind of indicated to me, after thinking about it for several years, is that these guys have done it for a while because of how smooth this operation was. Mm-hmm. So when we were in a tactical column going towards the center of this thing, they actually came from the flanks, but it was more of a diagonal, like a corner of the room, so to speak, right? For them, at a tactical advantage, they have interlocking fields of fire on every single person, and they had a team of 8, right? And the gear that they had was black OTV vests. They had black camouflage utilities.
So what you're saying is there would have been no they were professionals.
Yes,
there would have been
yes.
no Mexican standoff where if they fired, they're shooting into their other squad. They had perfect angles.
Yes, they did.
To where both sides could engage you.
Yes. Team of 4, team of 4. So it was like a fire team element.
Without worrying about a blue on blue situation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, with that being said, because as they approached us, you hear the safeties flip off. Now, your attention to detail, when you're seeing this kind of stuff, your senses are very heightened, so you can pick up. I know you being a combat veteran, you know all about that. Your heightened sense of awareness is going through astronomical changes. To
hypervigilant.
Yes. So you can hear stuff a lot clearer. And that's when you kind of picked up the hum that this object was doing along with these guys flipping their safeties off, especially M4s. It's very distinct sound. Anybody in this room who's held M4s and has shot them, M16s, things like that, it's very distinct sound to flipping it off. So we kind of knew, and they started yelling at us. They were like, you're not supposed to fucking be here. What the fuck are you guys doing here? Who the fuck are you with? So they knew they were using the kind of lingo that we were using too, especially in the military. So it made me think that at some point these guys actually were uniformed military at one point.
Any accents?
Not accents. It was just like American dialects, how you and I were talking. At one point they said they were going to smoke us. They could throw us out of a helicopter. It's very easy to get lost in the jungle out here. They kept saying stuff like that. So after they enveloped us, they all pretty much got in line. They told us to put our weapons, so we all got in line as well. And we had our hands up. We had our weapons slung. And they're having 2 guys watch while there's a guy basically taking our magazines out of our vest. And they're throwing them on the deck and they're kicking them away so we don't have time to react. They also, at the same time, the first thing they did was obviously take our weapon and clear it. But they took the magazine out and they actually held it in a way to where they could pull a charging handle and collect the round and have it not hit the deck. So the way that these guys operated was very smooth. It's very calculated, very precise. You could tell they've done this a lot, or they've rehearsed it a lot. Especially combat operations, you're doing terrain model rehearsals, you're doing rehearsals whether you're clearing rooms, trying to figure all that kind of stuff out. These guys kind of did the same thing, I'm assuming, because of how smooth it was. And because as well as I do, you have new guys that join a unit and they're not that fresh. They're very choppy because they have the basic understanding of either how to stack up and do room clearing. And the guys that have done it and been through combat deployments and all that, they're very kind of methodical, very smooth because they know what to expect. These new guys, it's not the same thing. You could tell these guys were seasoned. So as they did that, they actually, each Marine had 2 guys on them, plus one that was taking the stuff off of them. They actually knew where our military IDs were because in Marine Corps order, you have to have them in your left breast pocket.
So there were 15 of these guys, 3 on each Marine.
No. So they had other guys right here, and they had 3 that were just going through each Marine,
okay.
While other people were holding each Marine at gunpoint. And they're not like super close to us range wise with because if you get a muzzle close, it's easy to grab it and kind of fend off, especially with a rifle. But these guys were off at a standoff distance that even if you try to move, they could They could smoke you.
One search team of 3 guys.
Yes.
And then the rest of the squad was aimed in on you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and again, they're not anywhere where they could actually, there was people behind us, because obviously if they had to engage, they're going to hit one of their own guys probably. So it was more like they were kind of moving the same way through all of us, all 6 of us, taking our stuff, taking pictures of our military IDs, So they had like these devices that kind of look like a very thin, it looked like a smartphone modern day right now, because in 2009 it wasn't the case. I think the most high-tech thing they had at that time were maybe Blackberries, but they're bulky at that point with the ball, and then they had their flip phone razors and things like that. But these look like something you'd see today. And they were taking pictures of military IDs, and they had some other device that was like remind me of a BAT system. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Describe it.
It's like a biometrics tracking system. So what it does is when you come across with an insurgent, you can take pictures of their face, their retinas, fingerprints, something like that. But they were trying to scan their IDs with this thing, and it wasn't working. So they're kind of getting frustrated with it. So as this is going on,
did they collect biometrics from you?
No.
Okay.
No. Which they took pictures of us, but that may be enough. And then they took our IDs, because some people I talked to that are in the special operations community with that, they said, yeah, we have the ability to scan IDs, and it tells us everything about you. Military IDs, driver license, things like that. So it's very high speed stuff. And considering this was in 2009 compared to now, of course, they had this thing that they were using to load up stuff. It's very advanced physics, something hovering off the ground, not making any sound, but an audible hum, like a guitar amp or something that's like a transformer.
So it wasn't like, it didn't sound like a jet.
No.
It didn't sound like a helicopter.
Hell no.
There was no engine noise.
Nope.
Just a hum.
Just an audible hum. It's very creepy to see because it's not normal.
Was it like a bassy hum?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Like a guitar. Like if you were to unplug it, it wasn't the same pitch, but it was like the same kind of sound, same kind of noise that it emitted. And so as they're searching us, we're watching this thing happen. And that's when we started seeing trucks come from our left and go onto this platform. And they were up armored 350s. I know exactly what 350s are. They were kind of beefier trucks. They were matte black. When they were coming at us, and they go left. And I was glancing between what was going on in front of us with these guys, and then all of a sudden glancing over to what was going on behind them. And that's when I started seeing the key details of this thing. Like it had like a scale pattern on it, kind of like an octagonal, because the craft itself was like an octagonal shape where you could see points. Had a pyramid structure on top that was black, and you can see the shadowing of it as it rotated. But it was rotating very slow. And then it had like these vents on every single corner on the middle part of these the panels anyway. There was like a Vanta black. It was like a dark black that would like absorb light. Very weird.
What do you mean by that? A dark black that would absorb light?
So if you ever familiar with the BMW, they painted Vanta black. It was like a very super dark black. It's not like a reflective material at all.
The matte black?
Yeah, but very, 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 even darker than matte black.
Okay.
Like you can shine a light at it and it won't even illuminate.
Like the Batmobile?
Kind of. Okay. Something like that. But even, it was like very dark. The only way I can describe it was like that Vanta black.
Okay.
And
when you mean absorb light, you're saying if I shine a laser on it, you might not even see the laser.
Correct.
Or it would be very dull.
Correct.
Okay.
Something like that. So we're watching these vehicles, right? These trucks. Now, the thing I would say on the front of them, because Humvees, the military has, they have the IR lights on the front near the headlights that you can drive at nighttime with your knots. So they had the same thing because they had the same kind of slits that had the IR lights. But they had weapon cases in the back of each truck bed. And, you could store like a couple hundred weapons, maybe 100 weapons, maybe a platoon, a company-size element. And it was the same Pelican casings that we would use to store stuff when they were transloading, So very big cases on 2 of them in each truck bed. And then they had a shipping container thing. It looked like a shipping container, but smaller and half the size. And the thing that was different about this is I had a cylinder on the front of it that was towards the truck. It was like parallel to the ground, just a cylinder right on the top of this thing. And for years I thought, okay, there's got to be oxygen supply or like a vacuum sealing thing that you would, because obviously I'm thinking it's drugs. I was like, okay, so this is a very advanced way to do that, just years of thinking of this. And come to find out, when I gave my speech in D.C. on that Saturday for the Disclosure Project with Dr. Greer, he's got a lot of people coming out of the woodwork, by the way. And this gentleman, I'm not going to give any detail. I know a little bit about him. but he works in some of these projects that are some very controversial facilities. He's aware of what was going on. After I gave my presentation of this, he confirmed, he says, no, he's like, I don't want to leave Michael hanging out there, but I was not expecting to come and talk to you about this. And he went explaining what the operations do, why they do it, and what they were using them for. And he says, it's not drugs that they're putting in these shipping containers. He says it's humans.
Human trafficking.
Yes. His own words. And, he, of course. And he also wants to come forward, at least with him and 30 other people that are involved with that part of the work. But it was very disheartening to actually get that information relayed to me, because here I'm thinking for years it's drugs and it's a much sinister thing. But it makes sense because they use natural disasters that people are going to be missing anyway.
Yep.
Scoop up people.
How many containers do you estimate were put into the craft?
4, because I saw 4 trucks.
4 containers.
Yeah. And there could have been more, but at that point where we saw, we could have, because we stumbled onto this thing. We ruined their operation, so to speak, because we weren't allowed to see that.
Let's talk about the craft.
Okay.
How big was it?
300 feet is what I'm estimating, about a football field. And the reason why I say this is because we flew on CH-53 Super Stallions. I'm sure you're familiar with those, your time as a SEAL. They're roughly 100 feet. All right, so from nose to tail, if you lined up 3 of them, it'd fit 3 of them under this craft. Because I can see, especially the operation behind us, you kind of see them off in the distance. So you try to gauge, as a Marine, you're always trying to judge distance, you know what I mean? Because if you're having to engage, but lo and behold, we end up having a surprise right here happen with these guys. But that's how I know it was around 300 feet.
Okay. That's a, and it was circular.
Circular. It's like an octagon because it had like corners on it. That was like an octagon shape, but still circular.
Could you see, was it one smooth piece of metal?
No.
Was it panels?
Panels. Yep.
How just describe more. Were there windows?
So
were there
There were
openings?
not windows, nothing I could see like that. It just had that Vanta black vent looking things on each corner is all I saw with that. And it had like an octagonal scale pattern that went through it. It honestly reminded me kind of like a design for an F-22 Raptor.
Okay.
I like the top of it kind of looks like that.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of reminded me of because it would transition those colors. So I suspect, I've had people I've talked to about this to say, well, Lockheed Martin has reverse engineered stuff that's circular. Raytheon, they have triangular craft. And he said it might have been Lockheed because Lockheed also made the F-22.
Interesting.
Similar design concept. Now that I think about it, right, because at this time you're not really thinking about it. You're like, I'm more concerned with these guys and who the hell they are. So after we witnessed the last truck going on there, and we're still dealing with that. I got searched already, of course, and I'm just paying attention to what's going on. I'm making sure my guys are good too. And all of a sudden, the trucks, we never saw them again. They were not on that platform. There was like boxes and stuff that were on that platform. And so I'm assuming they either drove off on the other side or disappeared or where they went. I don't know. But all of a sudden, we noticed that this platform raises off the ground by itself. It doesn't make any noise, by the way. It doesn't disturb anything. It's just,
Before it started gaining elevation,
yeah.
How high off the ground was this?
The actual craft?
Yes.
I would say probably 20 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, good distance. And the platform rose up, but I'd say like the platform was up several feet, right? Probably maybe 5-6 feet, because it was from the distance probably about half an inch.
I mean, I'm envisioning the way you're describing this. I'm envisioning an octagon.
Yep.
Rotating clockwise with a drop ramp similar to maybe something you would see on the back of a C-130, C-17, but circular.
But circular and separate. There's no cables. There's no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was the ramp attached to the craft?
No.
So there was just an opening.
There was just an opening. Like the bottom part of the craft, was what I'm assuming, because that's where I saw it lift up and go into. It was like the bottom part. It was like the floor itself was like the platform, and they were just rolled up, right? But at the same time, the top part leveled a little bit and went down to meet with this. And as that happened, you start to see it rise up past the tree line. And it's not like a super fast and just rapid. It's just like kind of slow. As that's going on, the rotation has not changed. The audible hum has not changed. But
It's not like somebody hit the gas and you hear a different.
yeah, it's nothing like that.
Noise. It's
No,
just
constant.
okay.
Each point on that octagonal shape started to illuminate colors. Like, and it was just one color per point. It was red, it was green, it was yellow, and it was blue. Those were the only colors I saw, and it was rotating, right? As soon as it got to the top of the tree line, like cleared the trees, this thing shot off to the left. And to the left was the ocean, by the way. This was going west.
How far to the left was the ocean?
Probably a good mile and a half, maybe.
That's it?
Yeah, it
So
wasn't
you're
very-
right on the coastline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably, I would say, it could be a mile and a half to 3 miles, I'd estimate, because I mean, that's just estimation. I don't really know, because it took us a little bit when we landed into the near Padang City, because we landed at the airstrip, and then we took like a several-minute flight going from southwest to like northeast part, roughly. So I'd say probably a couple miles to kind of estimate. And like I said, it didn't change pitches of noise or anything, and it just completely shot off. I mean, it's just like a blur that went left. Didn't make a sonic boom like you'd see a fighter jet when you see the pressure, the way that happens. It didn't disturb any of the trees like what rotor wash would do on a helo or a jet flying the map of the earth and leaving exhaust and blowing you kind of see Top Gun movies when it cranks up on that.
propulsion.
Nothing. There were even coconuts that you could visibly see on these trees. None of them were disturbed.
I want to make a call for more whistleblowers watching to come out. There are guys out there watching your show, Delta Force, Navy SEAL, people in aerospace industry, various military commands that have dealt with or seen this, and they need to come forward because now there's a safe pathway for them to do it. And if you're corporate, now there's a 6-month clock on you. And we let me be very clear. We know who you are and where your assets are. And after those 6 months, you're subject to criminal prosecution, and you'll be lucky if that's all you're subject to. So this is getting very serious right now. That's why I'm on your show.
There's a 6-month window.
Yep.
When does that expire?
From the date this bill is finally signed. I mean, it's out of committee, it's going to be voted, and then it's an amendment to the intelligence bill.
Okay, so it's not actually, we're not wrapped up with that
No,
yet.
it's done. It's pretty much, it's done.
So what's your goal with the disclosure project?
Well, our goal is, first of all, to get this information to the key policymakers and people in the government who have responsibility for our national security, but also in other countries as well, and to the public so that they understand the difference, in my opinion, between the false information being purveyed, which is the dominant information that's out on the internet and Hollywood and shows, and the real information that needs to be understood by the public so that the public isn't deceived. So we have both an internal governmental objective to guide the government in understanding this and getting them as much detailed, actionable intelligence as possible. Like the details, and this is how they've gotten this far. The reason the bill that just came out of committee in the Intelligence Committee is because they now understand, if you read that bill that is given sort of a safe harbor 6 months amnesty period for these corporations and people to come forward or they'll be prosecuted. That is in the bill that left committee. And I've been pushing for this for a long time. The first time I recommended it was in 1993 to Bill Clinton, and nobody wanted to do it. Now it's going to happen, but that sets a clock. And so the Disclosure Project's objective is to give the legal government of the United States that we have allegiance to, and that we, the people, the public, the information, so that these rogue and very criminal activities can be brought under proper supervision and control, access control. And that's not the case right now. And it's dangerous that it isn't. So it's a very big step that first in December, they signed this law allowing whistleblowers to come forward through the Pentagon process, which is a top secret SCIF situation. But now this bill is going to explicitly state that these corporations, anybody having exotic materials, clearly referring to extraterrestrial type materials, technologies, bodies, those have to be disclosed and turned over to the legal U.S. government, or they will then be subject to prosecution criminally. So that's a 6-month window now. so that clock is started.
That's a 6-month window.
Yep.
And you're also going to make all of this, which a lot of it already is, open source information. For
Yes, if
everybody
we
to
could
see.
get some, you have to imagine myself and my wife and a few volunteers trying to scan, organize 8-10 terabytes of data, and then create a database system that's searchable, and then eventually get it on the internet. Now, what we do have to redact, the unredacted archive I'm giving to the top investigators in the Congress and the Pentagon group. The White House got a redacted version because they're not really leaning into this much yet, which they should be. But I have someone in the White House military office that we're providing information to. But the redacted one, just to be clear, the only thing we're holding back are the personal names of these, hundreds of whistleblowers who don't want their names known, except under certain conditions. And also, if they have a DD-214, I'm not going to release in a non-secure manner. So the folks who have the unredacted, those go into a SCIF, they go into a vault, they have it. Now, I will say on the record, anyone who says the U.S. government is not in possession of all the facts and the actual intelligence to get to the bottom of this is a liar or ignorant. They're either a liar or they're ignorant, because that was handed off 3 weeks ago, all of it. So there's actually no excuse now. The only excuse they'd have now is that they're part of a cover-up, in which case they should be prosecuted. And I'm saying even the people in the Aero office and the Pentagon, they either move on this and do it with integrity, or they should be prosecuted. And listen, anyone listening, you can come forward and only give information to me that you think is useful. If you want to go to the Aero process and be protected under the new law and give your testimony, we can do that. If you want to come out publicly, we can do that. It's really up to the person to determine if they were in special forces or Lockheed scientists or whatever, how they want to do it. We just want as many people to come forward because there's strength in numbers. But here's the other thing, Sean, we really need. We need to continue to grow the current state-of-the-art knowledge of where facilities are, operations, code numbers, code names, all that. Because that's how the investigators, and if necessary, people who will by force, if necessary, get these projects under control. That's what they need to have.
Let's move into your new documentary, The Lost Century.
Sure.
It's all about advanced technology, how it's been around for over 100 years, but kept secret. 0-point energy,
Yep.
a lot of people call free energy, is also called the quantum vacuum. This would basically eliminate the need for fossil fuels, utilities,
Wind,
everything.
solar,
Winds. Every means to power that we have now would make it completely obsolete. It would be unlimited, clean, and
Right.
free energy.
And we've had it for 100 years.
How do we? So let's get into this. How did you discover this stuff?
Well, it was an outgrowth of me looking into the UFO UAP issue. Because once you realize these objects are real, three-dimensional, the very first question, actually, when I go up to Capitol Hill or someplace, I'll put up the footage that the Pentagon said, this is a real 3D object, infrared sensors, no heat, no jets, no rockets, and certainly no nuclear power plant on it, because, those things are hot, right? Mm-hmm. There have been nuclear-powered aircraft and satellites. But I said, how is that moving at those speeds and then straight up against gravity? This is the alternative energy and propulsion systems. So I always tell people, forget all the mythology and everything. It's an alternative energy system. Now, it's a very advanced one because it also flies. Now, to be really clear, I am not advocating the release of the things that fly yet. Why? It's a missile delivery system. So you don't really want to open source an electrogravitic anti-gravity system that allows terrorists in Mogadishu to get a dirty bomb over downtown DC in 2 or 3 seconds, right? No. Now, but the things that would sit at your house, like your heat pump, all right, or in the hood of your car, that would run your car or your factory or your business or your home, those devices that are not things that fly, those are just pulling energy from the fabric of space-time around it. And physicists have estimated that the volume of space in a coffee mug has enough potential energy to boil off all the oceans of the world. Is that much latent energy. So tapping into it to run the entire United States, the whole world, be like taking a thimble of water out of the Great Lakes. So it is what, Tesla called it the infinite energy field. And it began to be discovered, if you look at it all the way back, but as soon as you step into the reality, the three-dimensional reality of these UAPs and UFOs, you immediately begin talking to people, and this is what happened to me in the early 90s, to people who know the physics of the energy systems, because these things are not using oil, gas, coal, nuclear, what have you. So it's a natural extension of the problem. And I point out to people, one of the central reasons for the secrecy that got out of control under Eisenhower's last 4 years as president was because once they realized how this works, they realized, the big industrialists and financial and global moneyed people, banking, this would be the end of that entire sector of the macroeconomic system. Well, that would have been great if it had been transitioned before I was born in 1955, because look at the world we have now. But it really could have started coming out in the early teens and 20s. If you look at the documentary, The Lost Century, the subcaption is, and how to reclaim it. We talk about how we need to come together as a people and develop these energy generation systems and open source them, meaning that it's no patent, no intellectual property held back at the first level of this, because the patent office will seize it. We prove that in the documentary. We have a national security order on a patent that a scientist I know submitted. We took his name off of it. So the question is, are there some people who can financially put up the funds, and it needs to be a substantial amount, 50 to 100 million to start, to create a high energy physics lab that develops this and gets it out to the public, no intellectual property holdback? Or if there was that much funds available, we could go to some of these scientists who probably have these and say, look, we want to just acquire this. Here's $10 million. Now go and relax. Let us move this out to the public. You can't do it. Most of these engineers and scientists and inventors think they're going to do it the way they do a new software program. And they're going to try to monetize it through intellectual property protections and patent. You cannot do that with this because the system is so completely weaponized and corrupt. And I'm talking from the patent office on. That the only way to do it is to do an open source release of it massively through the internet blockchain. So that's what we're doing. But the technology, if you look at this documentary, you'll see this trajectory. There's a great photograph with Nikola Tesla with this engineer farmer, self-taught guy. I believe it was 1908 or 1902, the caption. And this guy had like an earth battery. He had some metallic stakes and wires in the ground. He was pulling resonant energy. It was running his farm.
Wow.
Even my father, I wasn't alive. He was born in 1916. This was before my dad, who was hand-to-hand combat in World War II with the Japanese amphibious landing unit. But I'm going, what the heck? We have our planet. Half the planet's population doesn't have indoor plumbing. 3 billion people have no way to cook their food. They're cutting down the rainforest. 3 billion. The biosphere, even if you don't think climate change is real, 5 million people die from breathing particulate matter, soot, all over the world from this noxious stuff we keep burning. Yeah. So we need to take care of our creation, the earth, and our future. And it isn't going to happen with a windmill and a solar panel. Believe me, no way you're going to run 8 billion people off of those technologies. We're going to have innovative, high-tech solutions to the energy and environmental and poverty problems.
I mean, look, I just want to backtrack on that real quick. When you're talking about people dying from inhaling these particles and these chemicals and shit, I mean, this unfortunately is a touchy subject. The pollution and climate change and all this shit. But what I can attest to that is 100% fact is what you just said, because I've been to these parts of the world.
Yeah.
I've spent over a decade in these parts of the world, and you see all these veterans coming home dying of weird cancers from shit that they breathed in overseas.
Yep.
And I can tell you, in the wintertime in Afghanistan, the soot is so thick in the air that if you go outside we're talking just 5 minutes, and you go back inside and spit in the sink or spit in whatever,
Blow your nose. Yeah.
you're going to spit gray.
Right.
But
those fine particles get into your lungs and then your circulatory and heart and cause a huge number of problems, not just cancers, but I'm talking heart, lung disease. So why are we doing that when these technologies have existed? Now, this same corrupt organization, because it doesn't just deal with one issue, have been responsible for basically hoovering up, vacuuming up all these technologies for 100 years. I know people personally who have been murdered because they had one. And it's because they, very against my advice, AMA, against medical advice, against their own security interest, they wanted to keep it secret. And they thought they were going to be so clever, and they were going to outfox this big super state of thugs. And I'm going, dude, you have no idea what you're up against here. And then they think they're going to do encryption and keep it secret. I'm going, oh my God. You think this group needs to worry about an electromagnetic encryption when they can target a volume of space anywhere and extract anything being said?
I mean,
it's, and it's, I understand it, because if you're in the normal engineering world, you're not going to know this. It's hard to believe it. But I said, if you don't believe it, just wait. You're going to be dead, or it'll be confiscated. And you're lucky if all they do is come in and kick your door in, hit you with a national security order, and drag it off. That's your best outcome. That's your best case scenario if you do it the conventional way. So I go, look, it's like, what is that saying attributed to Einstein? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. The reason I can prove that the strategy most people use doesn't work is that we can prove these technologies have been around for over 100 years, and you and I are still tied into a coal-fired or gas-fired power grid, right? So if the strategies, if the conventional business and technology strategies were going to work, they would have worked before you and I were born. So we need to have different thinking about this strategically. So what we're saying is, all of these technologies, if they're used for peaceful purposes, would really give us a whole new civilization. Beautiful. Now, the downside is, given what humans are, we like to take any new technological breakthrough and weaponize it. But the truth is, they've already done that. Again, all of this gets into an understanding of physics that, unfortunately, we're not teaching our kids the real physics, the science of anything. I mean, we're all locked 100 years. This is the other part of the lost century I talk about, is that it has to do with medical technologies. I mean, as a doctor, I've seen some things that, oh my God, if we had that, the lives that could be saved. Spinal cord regeneration of lost limbs.
You've seen this stuff.
Yeah. At an underground lab on the Mexican-Texas border. Yeah. Sad. Mr. Herrera, by the time he was in, 2009, whenever it was, in Indonesia, that one was 300 feet across, man-made. Yeah. Think of it. Think of the length of a football field round, floating.
How are you able to tell which one of these are man-made versus ET?
At a great distance, you would know. If you're up close enough, the man-made ones are going to have components, protrusions, electromagnetic often. They're going to be seams, welding marks, underneath there could be pipes and other things. It's very clearly a man-made machine. The extraterrestrial ones, seamless. They're extruded in this process of how they create them. Even the light they give off is very different because it's coming through such pure material science, extremely pure materials. And then if you
we're still in the infancy stages we're still in the infancy stages of this compared to.
I'm afraid in 2023 we're certainly not in infancy. We have technologies and material science that are far beyond. Look at what Stephen Digna talked about, that Raytheon device. Out of 1 million people who would have seen or touched that thing, 1 million of them would have said it was extraterrestrial. No one would have thought we had that kind of technology. AI, organic quality to it. That, if you look at his testimony carefully, but that's how they've been getting away with doing the abductions, the quote alien abduction hoax. The way they've been able to do it is have technologies and also creatures that look like they're gray or reptilian or whatever. I know men who've worked on them, actually fabricated them. Those are man-made. And they're used for their psychological warfare purpose. This is one thing I would love to get Dr. Jacques Vallée to release this document he has from 1985. It's a CIA official document, and it describes the CIA conducting abductions, alien abductions in Brazil and Argentina, quote, for their psychological warfare value. Now, this is now, almost 40 years ago, 38 years ago. So those sort of projects, aside from being a crime in any jurisdiction anywhere on the planet, and a crime against humanity, is creating this false flag psychology, the preparation, because people are brainwashed thinking the aliens are mutilating and the aliens are abducting us. They have no need to do that. That's this disinformation campaign using incredibly high-tech technologies that we've studied from the extraterrestrials. So this is one of the real problems, is that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And this was my concern when David Grush started talking about an event where, the aliens were murdering people. I'm going, and that went all through Capitol Hill. I'm going, I know that incident. That was us. So people, and I don't think he understands, because he's a young man, the problem of having a little bit of information on this and thinking you know a lot is that you're going to step into a booby trap. And the booby trap is being played by the very unconstitutional criminals that people like him were trying to uncover.
You were working with Grush, correct?
We had met in March of 2022 in Culpeper, Virginia. I was asked to meet with him, and he had a security guy there with him. And I told him, look, I'll cooperate and get you anything you need. And so over about a 14-month period, until he told me he was leaving the U.S. government in April of this year, we would, periodically, occasionally we spoke through an encrypted system. Usually it was encrypted texts. But I have all these.
This is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the guy that he was just in the news.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he came out that there was a downed craft. We retrieved it
right.
with bodies, correct?
Yes. And those were a lot of this information I was providing to his bosses. And then he was in a field operation to go out and get to places. Now, he never got in to see it firsthand, but he talked to people, of course, that knew about it.
I mean, this actually hit the mainstream media,
oh, yeah.
correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, he's not the principal person I've been dealing with. The principal person would be the equivalent of a 2 or 3 star general if he was still in the military. But I think that, I try, my goal in all of this is that if someone is trying to do this on behalf of the legal government of the United States, I will give them any information I have. But we have a lot. I mean, our repository of intelligence on this by far is the largest in the world, certainly exceeds the legal government of the United States. I will say that for a fact. Now, my concern is that when you go from that to then falling into the clutches of folks in the UFO community, who then start giving you these tall tales of all these horrible things the aliens have been doing, I'm going, yes, but you haven't been read in to that part of the project. So this is like an onion, a stinking onion. You peel 500 layers of this onion back, and there's 500 more. And this is where a little bit of just superficial knowledge is a very dangerous thing, extremely dangerous. And my concern about that is that this is exactly the game that's going to be run on Congress and the White House.
Well, I mean, you're already seeing it. I mean, like I said, look, I don't trust the mainstream media, anyways.
Well, no, they're an asset of this group.
But
absolutely,
a lot of people do, and a lot of people don't put any legitimacy on anything unless Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC,
right.
Unless they touch it, nobody.
Right.
I'm not going to say nobody, because there's a growing. The population that doesn't believe in the mainstream media is just continuously getting larger.
It's probably half the population. Yeah.
But why do you think? I mean, that would be the biggest story in the world. Mm-hmm. We've recovered an ET craft with bodies, and on every news network they're all covering it, and then just like that, it's gone. No photos, no nothing. What happened? Why do you think it just disappeared?
Well, we know why. I mean, in 2001, when we did the first National Press Club event, we had a guy who was on a team that for several years in the 60s retrieved the bodies and the craft. And he spoke, and he had all of his information there. His name is Sergeant Clifford Stone. He's in our archive. Go look at it. So the people we just had at the National Press Club, a decorated U-2 pilot who encountered these objects back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, worked at the Lockheed operations and skunk work interface with Ben Rich directly, personally. He didn't get to go into that. But these guys are all available to give testimony. These are firsthand. David Grush was secondhand. He never was principally involved. Stephen Degna, was with two Raytheon guys with these man-made Raytheon devices. D.C. Long was in an underground facility out on the Range 19 with some Delta guys, took his dad in, who was a contractor, and they accidentally saw this system levitating a 100-ton concrete block up in the air, along with some giant boulders. Absolutely true. And we had people who were, at other operations that we brought. Now, those are all 100%. Every one of our 750 Disclosure Project folks are firsthand witnesses, meaning that they weren't people trying to find out like David Grush was. They're people who actually were in there. Interesting that the media won't interview them.
It is.
Though, if they really want to know the truth, why would you want to talk to a field operator who didn't have firsthand information and skip over the people who actually touched the things, saw them? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the public has to ask the question very quickly. How do we get the truth out? I think we're asking everyone to write their member of Congress and their two senators and the White House as an activist responsibility as a citizen of the United States, and refer to the National Press Club event and the Disclosure Project archive, because we've sent all this in, and say, now we need to see action taken. Now, whether the media, the corporate media, that I honestly believe is controlled by this same corrupt enterprise.
I mean, Doc, they're definitely controlled. I mean, there's multiple videos of them all reporting the exact same shit. I mean,
right.
It's ridiculous that anybody even watches it anymore.
Well, I mean, it's staged. And the problem with that, they do have, and this is the other big announcement, if there are any attorneys listening, we now have over 150 attorneys and legal professionals on our legal team. And not only will they protect and defend any whistleblowers and the project, but they also we're moving quickly towards issuing a civilian RICO, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization lawsuit. Who are going to be in the target? All these corporations and individuals. You can't use a civilian RICO against a government agency, but you can target the individuals and the corporations. That we are going to be doing in concert with this bill, saying now you need to come in out of the cold, or you'll be criminally. We can't criminally prosecute, but there is a U.S. attorney who's on the team that when we find actionable intelligence and get it introduced into court in a civilian RICO, he would then take it and see if he can pursue it under a criminal statute.
What I'm trying to do is bring to the light how many corporations would be pissed off if we did hit 0 point energy. You know, the gas industry, the power industry.
Oh, sure.
The car industry.
It's huge.
Everything, everyone.
Well, the car energy would just have to pivot to the type of motor, and an electric motor with a 0 point generator and a little teeny 3-volt battery will start it up. You don't need these lithium-ion ginormous battery banks. Those can be retrofitted. But yes, your public utilities eventually will retire because every home business will have its own energy source. Your big fossil fuel, oil, gas, coal, nuclear power plants, they will all be mothballed. Now, the only thing you'd really need oil for is chemicals, petrochemicals, plastics, things like that. So that is something, though, it's not going to happen instantaneously. As I said earlier, this is like a global Marshall Plan to rebuild the planet and regain this 100 years of lost social evolution for our civilization. But we squandered 100 years. And I don't think we have 100 years left to fix it. I don't think we have 20. So I think that well within your lifetime, and probably mine if I live old enough, certainly my grandchildren, we're going to need to have this established and done, or we're going to be in a true existential crisis. So you have multiple crises coming in at once. You know, the secrecy around UFOs, which is part and parcel keeping secret these technologies, right? And who is that benefiting? A handful of elites, super elites. Now, your average guy working at a utility plant or in an oil field, those are going to need to be supported and retrained to these new high-tech industries dealing with making this whole new system. And I think, we need to be very compassionate about the fact that there will be people displaced.
Well, at the same time, though, everything that we know will be a lot more affordable because it will not take the energy that it takes to produce all these things right now. That energy will be free.
That's the biggest component. You think about the energy it goes into digging the raw materials up, manufacturing it, shipping it to a place where it's assembled, shipping it again, and then delivering it to your store or your home, and everything from the delivery vans and jets to the manufacturing process is running on the current energy system. Mm-hmm. So yes, when the energy costs go to zero, after you have a device that's operative, then you're looking at the ability to have extraordinary abundance. And this is the tide that will lift all the boats in the third world and developing world also, by the way. And it's sort of like how they leapfrog from landlines like we used to have, right, to sell, they just bypass the landlines. The rest of the world will be able to go from having nothing in the way of energy generation, 3 billion people have no power energy at all, to having these systems. And suddenly you're going to see so much happen in the world that is going to be a human advancement. And aside from the air and everything becoming pristine and clean, there are going to be such great opportunities for, the dispossessed people of the world, which I think if you don't pay attention to that, this is how you end up in disgruntled segments of the population in the world that later become terrorists or adversaries. So I think looking at this in the largest possible way, it's a win-win for everyone if we take care of the workers that would be displaced. As for the mega giant corporate entities, they just need to pivot to these new technologies and realize that era is over.
Let's talk about some of the ways that they are suppressing these methods of free energy. Black shielding.
Yep, easy. I know guys who have had this happen where they pick it up They'll get a buyout. Oh, here's $50 million. There's Lieutenant Colonel Bearden had a man who had one of these devices back years ago, and the guy didn't have a pot to pee in, and he was very, sort of this inventor, bootstrapping it. Thing was real. It was a real free energy device. And next thing you know, is he's driving around in a Lamborghini and wearing Armani suits. Well, he got basically a pay, but he said, yeah, I can't talk about that. It was bought. It was put on the black shelf of a corporation. There it sits. So with enough money, you can pretty much buy out. What's your number? In other words, because if you're protecting a $900 trillion asset base, what is $50 million? Nothing, right? So, and I know many people have had this happen. So that black shelving goes on all the time. The other, of course, and then you get into more nefarious activities.
National security orders.
Yep, NSOs. We have one in the film. It shows the patent office slapping a national security on a patent application of an inventor I know, whose lab I have been in.
Patent seizures, financial entanglements,
Yep.
legal entanglements, credible threats, scientific fraud. What do you mean by scientific fraud?
Well, this is where they will deliberately take a device and cause it to be altered so it doesn't work, but they trick people to get money out of them. So in other words, I've actually been a victim of a couple of these. Very clever. But it's basically where you try to siphon off the resources. There's a big venture capital guy I know. He was almost taken last year for $150 million by a group that was going to put it into a fraudulent effort. But so by intercepting that man's interest, they would then, of course, sideline him. So his financial interests were not going to something productive. That was deliberately being put into a fraudulent sting operation. I've seen a number of these.
Media corporation.
Well, the media, part of the problem is that even if you have one of these devices, is the media going to report on it honestly? Well, it's just like the UFO issue, which is another reason why we need influencers like yourself, but also some of these celebrities that have supported what we're doing. Because my view is that if we had one of these things right here on the table and it worked, and we tested it, reproduced it, had plans for it, the first 30 that we would make would go to some key people in DC and some big time celebrities that have their house running on it. And you'd have 2 billion people find out about it in a matter of days. Because what you have to do is figure that the corrupt influences in the scientific and media community that have kept the UFO issue secret are going to kick in on this. So you have to develop a strategy to work around that. I liken that we need to be sort of water flowing, and if there's a huge boulder in front of us, we flow around it or find a way around. Because there are going to be these obstacles, and there have been. And that's one of the big problems. If the media had done its job on all these issues, notwithstanding their lip service to the environment and climate change, if they had done their investigatory job as the fourth estate and a free press, I wouldn't have had to leave my medical career. So the biggest liability here is with the media.
Wet works.
Well, that's just a term used at the agency for assassinations and targeted killings. It's just a slang, but wet comes from blood, obviously. But yeah, a number of people, one in particular I worked with very closely, was killed. And I think others have been over the years, because they didn't do anything rational. Here's how I'll be honest with you. If you have this kind of information, you're sort of holding a hand grenade in your hand that the pin's been pulled. If it's a legitimate system, because there are all these corrupt interests that'll do everything in their power to keep it from going from your lab out to the public. So I think this is where you have to then have a strategic plan to disclose that open source and then get it out through alternative media and influencers and celebrities. I mean, everyone from Leo DiCaprio to Ariana Grande would be thrilled to have a device like this to save the environment, right? So you use the strengths we have. The strengths we have is that 99% of the population would benefit from this. Most of the people who are highly influential, artists and celebrities, would love to see it. And even the corrupt politicians, once the public demand it, they'll have to do it. They'll have to say, yeah, thank you for your donation, ExxonMobil, but we're still going to have to support this. So a lot of this comes down to the public we the people, stepping in on this. I think it's a huge mistake to think that the government of the United States or a big corporation is going to do this.
Yeah.
The history shows they will not.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I wanted to ask you, one of them being MAGIC, the organization that runs covert projects. Can you expound upon that a little bit?
Well, the majority Joint Intelligence Committee. It's a name that's been used back in the old days. There was allegedly a group called Majestic 12. That was a group in the Truman era and early Eisenhower era. But it's basically a committee. It's transnational. It's people from different countries that are on the upper end policy group of this whole problem. And there are a number of people who've been involved over the years. Certainly Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, former Vice President Dick Cheney, George H.W. Bush, a number of people. And I've met with some of the others. And they pretty much determine policy on these sort of big global issues. And part of their portfolio would be the UFO issue. Part of it would be all this new energy issue because they're hand in glove, the same thing.
Yeah.
And then there are other problematic agendas.
How many people do you think are involved in this?
Well, I think at the upper level, my understanding is about 200 or 300 folks.
Globally?
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's totally global. You know, I tell people it's not international the way we think of the State Department, and it's transnational. So they basically maneuver, and also in other countries, this organization moves with alacrity across all boundaries with these sort of assets, these sort of man-made UFOs, and can do all kinds of operations with they don't need the permission of the host legal government. So this has become a global power. When Senator Inouye said there exists a secret government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's above the law and free from the law itself, right? He was chairman of the committees back then. And then he confirmed to my attorney, when my attorney, Derek Garcia, was a young intern up on Capitol Hill, that in fact, he had seen the 2001 Disclosure Project event, said, yep, Senator Inouye said, all that's true, and there is a secret government running all this. So I tell people, don't take my word for it. Listen to this high-ranking senator. There have been a number of people who tried to blow the whistle on this and point people in the right way, and no one followed up on it. And I think we're reaching a point now where I think we're out of time to let this stretch on for another even 2 or 3 years. My understanding is that if within 6 to 12 months, the results of this new bill is not forthcoming. In other words, if these corporations and individuals don't capitulate and provide what they have to the legal U.S. government, then force will be necessary.
Which brings us to the strike team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the strike team?
I'll just say carefully that people who are utterly fed up in the legal government, who have the means to do something beyond a hearing, that are, special operators and what have, absolutely a clock has been set.
Let's talk about...
And the reason for that is they now realize that the organizations doing this are treasonous, and they are subverting the interests and the national security of the United States. And the rogue elements, the worst, are doing all kinds of crimes under cover of Pentagon or under cover of agency, under cover of the government. Excuse me. This is a complete abuse of power. So
is this strike team from the U.S. government?
I don't want to comment beyond
Okay.
that. It would be it'd be an authorized operation against these illegally run rogue elements.
Okay.
Okay, and obviously with full rights to do so. So obviously, and the real question becomes, those guys, anyone involved with that, would need to have enough detailed information about what the adversary has, right? You're going to walk into an ambush otherwise. So one of the things we have to do is get as much good, detailed information on methods, assets, where they're located, where the bases are, where the entries are, what technologies that can be deployed as a countermeasure. But we're all hoping this never has to happen. Because if the American people listening would actually take action, and and the members of Congress and the White House would begin to take this very seriously, all of that could be avoided. And so my hope is that there's a smooth, non-kinetic solution. Let's just put it that way.
Completely unrelated to that,
Yeah.
the Hopi prophecy.
Yeah, the Hopis. Well, this is interesting because the time we live in, many people feel, many ancient peoples, and even scriptures, related to the time of sort of the ending of one whole era and the opening of another. And I think that's the truth. I think we're at this point of transition between an old world and a new one. Now, some people say it's the end of the world. I said, no, it's the end of the old world and the opening of a new one. So in the Hopi prophecy, the Hopi prophecy rock, there's one line that terminates, and that's our civilization terminating if we don't get this right. There's another one where then it takes off and it goes off into infinity. So it's like humanity, as I see it, is at this critical juncture where we need to choose whether we're going to go forward and keep going for hundreds of thousands of years and go out into space peacefully, all of it, or we're going to blow the whole system and have a terminal situation. So the Hopis had this in their prophecy.
Who are the Hopis?
There's a Native American tribe in the desert Southwest.
Okay.
Yeah. My grandmother was Cherokee, but I'm familiar with some of these different traditions, and I think that my dad was half Cherokee and half Scottish. Interesting mix, but I think this is why you look at it. Many people around the world get this sense that we're at this inflection point, not just politics and this and what have you, but our whole civilization. And I think these extraterrestrial civilizations know that. They know that we could get into a lot of bad trouble and have things happen that will be extinction level events if we're not careful. On the other hand, they know that if we came together and were, for once in our history, did the right thing peacefully, we could transition to a civilization that literally will be interstellar. Maybe not in my lifetime, but in probably your children's.
How do you think that the anti-gravity technology that's using gravity as a power source, how is that happening? Do you have a brief explanation on?
I really think it's gravity control and gravity wave control. As for a power source, I think the power source was better described as this quantum vacuum energy or zero-point energy. But it's like two separate things but are related. So you can have a zero-point energy system or a free energy system. It doesn't move and it's not affecting gravity, but at a certain resonant frequency and power, and has to do with vortices, toroidal energy patterns, you can then cause what I call mass cancellation, where an object literally takes on weightlessness. Now, if you go back in the documentary, we touch on this, all the way back to T. Townsend Brown, and what was later called the Beefield-Brown effect. In the late 1920s, he took a very high voltage system at a very certain, with wires around a crystalline material, and it levitated, just floated. Now, that was almost 100 years ago, late 20s. That was then the Kautsky-Frost experiment in Germany, around the same time, confirmed it. Later, the whole Biefeld-Brown effect, studying very high voltage VHV systems, began to be increasingly studied and classified in the 30s and 40s. By the time World War II ended, Adolf Hitler had a disc-shaped electrogravitic, but it wasn't stable, which is why he could never use it in the war. But it was brought back to America by Paul Mellon and General Patton and Allen Dulles. So that device actually became a very important object to study at the end of World War II. And of course, that technology got advanced greatly by studying the extraterrestrial materials that we also were beginning to acquire by using electromagnetic weapons to down the ET craft. So you had two rivers of technology being developed from the 20s, 30s, 40s that intersected with the extraterrestrial technologies, and they hybridized them.
Shit.
So that's what happened between 1945 and 55, that decade.
How many different ways do you think how many different ways are there to harness this kind of energy?
Oh, I think there are dozens.
How did Tesla do it?
Tesla, I think, was actually capturing resonant magnetic field energy of the Earth that's almost boundless. So there are a lot of, quote, free energy approaches. I think the ones that use these very high voltage systems that create a sort of a vector, a tap, as it were, into this quantum vacuum energy and zero-point energy field, those began to be stumbled across, but sort of episodically as a phenomenon back in the late 1800s, because that was the heyday when they were first discovering electromagnetism. And I think Maxwell and Faraday, some of these guys stumbled across this, but they didn't know what it was. You were getting more energy out than you had to put in. So I think you can have a rotational coil-based device. Floyd Sweet, who we feature in the movie, had a solid-state device that was about this big that could run a 300 horsepower electric engine for your car. No other batteries, the little teeny.
You had video of that.
Yep, we have video of it. It was tested by a Lieutenant Colonel, Tom Bearden, who's a very dear friend of mine, just passed away. He handed off all of what he knew about this to us. We have a file that was a CIA operative named Sajaki that I knew, but he had a guy I know named John Bedini, who was allowed to copy a bunch of confiscated patents, and we have that disk. So we need to send up a research lab to do this and get to the bottom of it, I think, Sean, very quickly, because we need to do it. Look, if this technology came out in the next year or two by a group that could just put it out, open source it, thousands of companies would then adopt it, and we'd be able to really transform the trajectory of the planet. Now, there are going to be certain losers in that process. Like any new technology, oil, gas, coal, centralized public utilities, they'll all have to be retired. But keep in mind, it's going to take 15 years to do this. You know, your car and my car running, if you have a conventional vehicle, 100 million vehicles are made a year. There are 1.5 billion motor vehicles on the road worldwide. Mm-hmm. That's 15 years if you waved a magic wand and converted every manufacturing entity to a zero-point electric system. That's not going to happen. So, you know, it's going to take a couple of decades.
Back to the zero-point energy and why the government will want to suppress it. I mean, we've talked about, and they're also in your documentaries as well, that, mm-hmm. I mean, you're taking, I mean, let's talk about how ExxonMobil, you know, plays into this.
Well, all of the big financial, you know, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, the big oil, petrodollar, all that, is they understand that they want to keep the status quo or tinker around the edges with what I call the pseudo-environmental initiatives, like a Tesla car that you plug in. Well, you have, you know, hundreds of pounds of lithium-ion batteries that are toxic in how they're made and disposed of, charging off a gas and coal-fired grid. People don't think, they think it's free energy. No, you're plugging into a grid that's smokestacks and maybe nuclear if you're lucky. Very little of it is wind and solar. 12%, something. So the problem is it has such a huge impact macroeconomically. But I would correct one thing. It's not the U.S. government doing anything. Like the U.S. government, I would say virtually no one in the Congress and the Pentagon or White House know about those technologies. So they're not suppressing them. But are there people under cover of the authority of government doing it? Yes. And that is the criminal aspect in the government. That is the rogue element in the government, whether it's the Patent Office or the Department of Justice or anyone. So they're deliberately, I would say the majority of the U.S. government, whether you're left, right, center, would like to see a solution to the energy and environmental and poverty problems around the world. But of course, there are a lot of pigs feeding at the trough of the lobbyist money from the impacted industries, because we're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets that are tied up in oil, gas, coal, nuclear, public utilities. I mean, you'd look at the Fortune 500 list of companies globally, not to mention nation states, But, I always point out we've had a 150-year run of that old smokestack technology. These others should have begun to come out 100 years ago and transitioned over. Now we're hitting up a red line, not only geophysically, but geopolitically, where you have half the world in poverty. And let's face it, if everyone in the world where you've been and I've been lived like you and I do, the price of a gallon of gasoline would be $150 a gallon. If they were using the kind of energy that you and I use, and it was all 8 billion souls on Earth. So the only way to solve the human future issue and geopolitical problems is to allow these technologies to begin to be phased in that at least, create energy, even if we hold back the things that fly. I think these electrogravitics need to be held back.
I mean,